Up next, we will begin our panels this morning with a discussion featuring representatives from innovation foundations who fund conservation in the United States. Our moderator is Debbie Reed, Executive Director for the Ecosystem Services Market Consortium. Debbie has worked on the ESMC and its activities since its inception. She has focused on greenhouse gas mitigation and ecosystem services from the agricultural sector since 1997, having worked at the White House Council on Environmental Quality as the Director of Legislative Affairs and Agricultural Policy, and in the U.S. Senate as a senior staff member on natural resource and agriculture issues for U.S. Senator Robert Kerry of Nebraska. Previously, Reed held numerous leadership positions at the USDA, including Special Assistant to the Deputy Undersecretary for Research, Education, and Economics, and Special Assistant to the Administrator of the Agricultural Research Service. Her work at USDA included serving on multiple binational commissions on agricultural science and technology, and as the USDA Executive Secretariat for the U.S. Dietary Guidelines for Americans. She has graduate and undergraduate degrees in human nutrition and dietetics, chemistry, and communications. Please join me in welcoming Debbie and this morning's panelists.
Thank you very much, Kim, and also thank you, Dr. Perryman. That was a great introduction and a great kickoff, I think, for what we're going to discuss. So I'm with the Ecosystem Service Market Consortium. We're a new market-based consortium conceived and designed for the agricultural sector. We started in 2017 really by looking at the challenge that we hadn't seen carbon markets or ecosystem service market opportunities scaling for the agricultural sector. And we spent some time talking about why that is. What are the challenges there? What are the obstacles? What could we do different to actually make ecosystem services an opportunity and a solution set for the agricultural sector at scale? So we started on a journey, and we've really redesigned and conceived these markets from the perspective of farmers and ranchers and the agricultural sector. So we're building them to actually work at scale for agriculture and natural and working lands. I have colleagues here with me who have all invested and become partners in the Ecosystem Service Market Consortium. And before I introduce them, I'll just talk a little bit more about what it is we're doing right now. So we're a member-based organization, and we have members from across the food and agricultural supply chain, food and beverage sector. And it's actually serendipitous that we are at a point in time where there's huge demand for ecosystem service markets and the ecological outcomes from these markets. And the sector, the agricultural sector in particular, has great opportunities to actually provide a lot of the solution sets. What we're engaged in together, collectively, is really providing the tools, the platforms, bringing together the technologies and innovations to make these markets really scale and make them work from the perspective of farmers and ranchers and forest or other landowners, for instance, who are really operating on the landscape. So that's a nutshell version of what we're doing. We're really pilot testing right now, and Dr. Perryman, we are kicking those tires. And really trying to figure out how to do this better. How do we build a better mousetrap so that it does work and so that it does scale? So I'd like to go down maybe the line and have each of my colleagues introduce yourself, tell me who you are, who you're with, and what is your organization, why are you engaged with ESMC? What of your goals and objectives is ESMC perhaps helping you to achieve?
Absolutely. Good morning, everyone. My name is Lakeisha Odom. I'm from the Foundation for Food and Agriculture Research. Our organization was created in 2014 with the express purpose of increasing the amount of funding and research through the creation of innovative public-private partnerships. So when thinking about where we are as far as our priorities and some of the reasons why we were so excited by the ESMC platform and the objectives of the project, it really was because we're focused on looking for innovative and exciting research, looking for these public-private partnerships. We feel like this particular project is kind of a perfect example of the type of work that we like to do. It's filling a need. It's solving an intractable issue. It's putting research into the hands of farmers in a way that's practical and useful to them. And so I think that that's one of the initial reasons we were so excited by it. The breadth of partners, both nonprofit, academic, industry partners working together to try to solve challenges with a farmer focus. So I think that was just, I think, a perfect example of our mission and the type of projects that we like to support through our organization.
Thank you, Lakeisha. What Lakeisha didn't indicate is that FAR has invested $10.3 million in our market, and it has enabled us to build this great public-private partnership with 50 members now who are really investing in the opportunity. How about you, Amy?
Great. Good morning, everyone. I'm Amy Saltzman. I'm with the Walton Family Foundation, and we've been engaged in conservation work since about 2009. Our environment program, which I'm a part of, has 3 different parts. We work on oceans and fisheries sustainability. We work on the Colorado River and water quantity issues. And we work in the Mississippi River Basin on water quality issues, and that's where my work focuses. And we've been working since 2009 with farmers on the ground to implement conservation practices that improve water quality. So we've worked both with in-field practices and edge-of-field practices. And we have seen some success with the sort of farmer-to-farmer model that a lot of our grantees have used. But as we've moved forward in our work, we've thought increasingly about how you scale up this work and how you reach new farmers and what we call middle adopters. You know, how do you get beyond those people that are just sort of interested in conservation because they're interested in conservation? And we've seen that the supply chain is a way to think about creating market pull for crops produced more sustainably, but we've also seen there's a lot of challenges with that supply chain work. And so I think one of the things that we're really excited about ESMC is bringing lots of supply chain partners to the table and developing sort of common metrics and measurements and understanding of how we measure outcomes from conservation that will be shared across these different supply chain companies. I think we've seen that has been a challenge as we've gone about the supply chain work piecemeal. So I think we're really enthusiastic about ESMC for that reason.
Thanks, Amy. And how about you, Dave?
Hi, Dave Gagne. I'm with the National Fish and Wildlife Foundation. We were formed back in 1984 by Congress. We started off as a small little foundation. When I first got there about 14 years ago after I left NRCS, I would also point out that I love being at this meeting because I worked for NACD for a number of years as well. I'm an alum of the NACD Employee Association, I guess. But I've now been at the foundation for about 14 years. And when I got there, our executive director had just gotten there. Jeff Trandle had been clerk of the House for a number of years, House of Representatives for a number of years. And we were at a $25 million foundation, putting out about 25 a year. We now put out over $450 million in grants every single year. And what we have found over that time is that where we get our money from, be it we get a little bit of appropriations money, 10 to 13 million a year, but then the primary dollars are corporate, foundational, family foundations, individual giving. We have 16 different federal agencies that we get money from, and all of these folks now want one very simple thing: details / facts. I guess it's 2 things in a sense, but the same thing. Yeah. So what they're looking for are details about what we're spending the money on. They don't want us just to spend money. Don't just give out money. They want to know, what are the results from those funds? Is it working? You made a grant. Is it working or is it not working? Many of you in the room have been recipients of these funds. We've got tons and tons of districts that get dollars every single year. And a number of you state cons and others in the room have been funders, and some of the corporations in here have been funders. But what they want to know is it working? What are the details? How much nitrogen was reduced? How much phosphorus was reduced? Did we get much sediment control? Did we get more sage grouse on that property? Did we get more quail on that property? We've got projects all across the continental US, all across the Pacific, et cetera, and the folks that are funding these things want to know. So why are we on at ESMC and at that table? Because this group, this really crazy, dynamic group that have all these major companies and federal agencies and other partners involved, are trying to figure out how to best measure the work that's being done on the ground. And if we can measure that, can we also start getting value for those growers and for those communities? So that's why we're there, and we're excited about it. This is in the right direction. Lots of folks have tried lots of different models, tried different ideas, but with the crew that Debbie and Bruce and the rest of the team have gotten together, boy, I tell you what, it's really, really dynamic. And as our Dr. Perriman was saying, surround yourself with smarter people. Trust me, I am surrounded by smarter people than I every time I go to their meetings, and I'm learning a ton, but we're also moving towards some great, great things.
Thank you. So you've all touched on kind of where we're trying to go with ESMC. So we've designed these markets so we can actually follow science-based, outcomes-based approaches to track what's happening on the landscape. We're able to generate with one approach credits for soil carbon, increased soil carbon, reduced greenhouse gases, water quality, and water quantity. Because we know that any actions undertaken on the landscape actually have multiple benefits. And that's one of the innovations we're bringing to this space, is the ability to really stack the services, monitor what's happening, quantify it, verify it, and ensure that the demands we are placing on farmers and ranchers and landowners are being recognized and being rewarded. So our intent is, we measure what's happening, we create credits, we sell them, and then we can reward the farmers and ranchers who do this. We have been placing a lot more demands on farmers and ranchers and landowners for these services, right? Whether we are consumers saying, I want to know how my food is grown, I want to know how the land is managed, or corporate players who also are trying to be responsive to consumers. So again, what we're trying to do here is build the tools and build the partnerships so that we can track what's happening on the ground. So Lakeisha, why don't you tell me, like, what is it that you are looking for in partnerships, either with ESMC or others, to help build the goals and outcomes that you're seeking?
Absolutely. So I think the things that make an excellent partnership for our foundation, I'm sure it's not going to be different for some of the other panelists, is an alignment of vision, right? So a huge part of what FAR's mission supports is identifying intractable issues, in particular space and agriculture, and this definitely does that, right? ESMC definitely does that. We're also looking for partners that share a desire to try and push innovation, to address scalability, to address economies of scale, things along those natures. So we typically look for partners that are as interested as we are in public-private partnership, in engagement, in innovation, in science-based research, because that's basically what we're created to support. So I think any partnerships that are supporting those spaces are very exciting to us. And then we have strategic priority areas around soil and water, advanced animal systems, urban agriculture, crops, and food and nutrition. So if those things can also align in those key areas, we're excited about that as well. So alignment with our strategic funding priorities, as well as I think an alignment of a particular, I guess, mentality around supporting particular research that will be put in the hands of farmers, and also pushing the envelope. I think FAR likes to fund projects that really try to do something in a different way. In the previous talk, it just kept running over and over in my mind. If you want to try and get somewhere you've never been, you've got to do something that you've never tried to do before, and that really resonated with me. I think is if FAR had a particular, personality trait, I think it's we seek out those opportunities to do some things that maybe haven't been done in a particular way before. So we like partners that share that energy with us.
Great, thanks, Lakeisha. And how about you, Amy?
I think we seek a lot of the same things in partnerships. We were talking about this question earlier, and we were just we're all going to agree with each other. I think one thing that's a little bit different about the work that we do at the Walton Family Foundation is that we're really interested in sort of seeing the growth of conservation on the ground, and a lot of our metrics that we sort of report up to our board are focused on that. And so for us, we think it's really important for our grantees to have close partnerships with farmers, to be trusted advisors with farmers, and I think that's one way that conservation districts can be really good partners for us. You're often trusted advisors of farmers in your areas. And we see that conservation districts can also link between farmers and other organizations that are, sort of wanting to get farmers to adopt new conservation practices. One really successful example that we've seen is in Indiana. We support some work at Notre Dame with the Indiana Watershed Initiative. I don't know if I have any Indianans in the room. Yeah, I do. Great. But we've seen that project, the Indiana Watershed Initiative, has been really successful because it's brought together a community of people, including sort of academics, folks from different NGOs, really importantly, the Soil and Water Conservation Districts in Kosciuszko County, hope I said that right. And we've seen great success with that project that's pairing cover crops in the field with an edge of field intervention called a two-stage ditch. And we know that without the work of the Soil and Water Conservation District, farmers would not have come to the table with the folks from Notre Dame, right? Like they did not have those relationships with the farmers. So we think that serving that role of trusted advisor and connector between both folks on the ground and those coming in from other places is a really important role for conservation districts to play.
And how about you, Dave, in terms of partnerships? What are you looking for on the ground?
It's interesting. Most foundations, and what's interesting about this panel is, please understand, we are all three of us really different. Mm-hmm. The way we give money, what we're looking for may have a lot of similarities, but we are, you've got a family-oriented foundation, two congressionally chartered, but our charters are different. We have different authorizing language. So we're approaching it from slightly a research angle, and let's be honest, mine, the National Fish and Wildlife Foundation, how much do you think we spend on soil health? Probably be shocked, about $50 million a year. But boy, it never says soil in that National Fish and Wildlife Foundation piece of it. So what are we looking for? It really depends on the project. I would urge people, please go to our website and apply for money. If you haven't gotten money from us, I told a lot of people in the room, I was gonna say this one thing: why not? Why are you not applying? And if you have any questions on what you should be looking at doing for us, call. Just call one of our staff. I got a buddy out here from the staff, Eric. I hope he's out there somewhere with the lights. I'll never see him. But the reality is, please apply to it, because each of our programs has a business plan, and it'll tell you exactly what we're looking for within that project, what metrics we're looking to click on, what measurements we're looking to find. I'll point a quick one out, which would be in New Mexico and Texas. On that partnership, the funding comes from NRCS, Fish and Wildlife Service, BLM, Forest Service, and about $3 million a year from oil and gas companies. They want to avoid some ESA issues. So in that case, it's ESA that we're trying to avoid. We're trying to keep something or some things off of the endangered species list. So we're trying to keep ranchers ranching. That's the goal. That is our primary goal, is to keep ranchers ranching. Because if they're not ranching, we're going to have invasive species issues, we're going to have development issues, and others that won't meet our goals. So while we may be called the National Fish and Wildlife Foundation, at the end of the day, our biggest concerns are working lands working, ranching, row cropping, forestry, etc., and looking for those metrics that make that happen for us.
That's fantastic. Thanks, Dave. So you bring up a great point. So one of the things ESMC did in reimagining markets for agriculture is we realized that existing markets were actually designed around point sources of pollution, and agriculture, of course, is not a point source of pollution. So the metrics are important. Not only that, but farmers and ranchers farm and ranch first and foremost. And if we are desiring something else from them, we have to understand they need the flexibility to make decisions on daily, weekly, monthly basis to deal with weather, to deal with climate, to deal with, variable precipitation, pests and pestilence, et cetera. So we're really trying to be very flexible and change the rules about flexibility so that we're not tying the hands of landowners who are in fact working the land. We are in fact concerned about climate change and our ability as organizations who work with growers who are doing business outdoors to both ensure that we are addressing issues like climate change and water resource issues, but also providing the tools. Looking ahead in terms of each of your organizations, what are the high priority items you are dealing with either now or in the future that you think are important that maybe we can collectively address as partners?
Since you looked at me, I'll start.
Yes, please do, Lakeisha. Next time I'll mix it up.
So I think that one of the areas that our organization recently announced, as recent as literally a week ago, was an Ag Climate Partnership. And in that space, we want to form a partnership more effectively with U.S. Farmers and Ranchers Alliance and the World Farming Organization. And the key priority of that is identifying additional research spaces and research gaps in that climate space. So I'm really excited that our organization is focused on that, and that ties, I think, very nicely in with some of the work that ESMC is doing. And I think some other areas, at least in my specific portfolio, I manage the soil health portfolio. So I was excited to hear this $50 million over here. So
she's going to apply.
I know, he said I could apply. And so I think that one of the areas I'm really excited about and interested about is looking at rangeland and pastureland soil health and what we can do in those spaces, because much of the work that our foundation has done in soil health has been very specific to row crop, and that's really needed, but there's a whole other section of folks that I think we could really get their input, their buy-in, and their impact on how we could really effectively allow farmers, ranchers to manage their pasture and rangeland more effectively. So those are two areas that I'm pretty excited about, at least for the next, I think in the next 6 to 8 months, those are spaces where we'll have additional projects coming out and funding available for research in those areas.
That's great. With beef and livestock right now in the crosshairs in a lot of arenas, I think it is important to understand that the land that those cattle and other livestock live on is actually very important land for us as, humans, right? There's biodiversity, there's open land, there's water percolation and filtration that's happening there. There's lots of things, so I'm glad that you brought that up. How about you, Amy, in terms of either current, building, or future priorities that you're focused on?
Yeah, so I would say we are in the midst of strategic planning right now, so we are still focused on water quality, and we may have new things that we're working on, but we're not quite there yet. But I think two of the things that we're thinking about in our strategic planning process are continuing our focus on water quality, but also thinking about how you can, as you were saying, stack those other benefits and get value for the other benefits, because lots of the practices that produce water quality also reduce water quantity. If you're talking about sort of infiltration, places where it rains a lot in the Midwest where we work, and also being able to stack carbon benefits on that. So I think that's one of the reasons that we are excited about the ESMC model, because it allows farmers to potentially access markets for each of the outcomes that they're providing. And I think we're also, really interested in scale and what incentivizes farmers. So different than the other folks up here, as a family foundation, we do fund a little bit of work around policy and thinking about how policy incentivizes particular practices. And we do that on both sort of a federal policy level and a state policy level. And I think we are interested in thinking about how the current agricultural policy structure incentivizes current practices that farmers have, and whether there are ways that we can change those policy incentives to result in more of the public benefits that we are seeking from increased conservation practices.
Great, thanks, Amy. And Dave, in terms of future priorities, right? So fish and wildlife, there's a lot wrapped up in there, and it is surprising that you're dealing with soil health.
you know, it really is, let's name a state, let's name a region of the country, and the priorities change from place to place.
Right.
Based on both our funders and our partners and what everyone's looking to do. An area that we are very interested in, or two areas that we're very interested in within the ag sector are economics and absentee landowners, that whole interface there. The economics being, and this is so important with ESMC, creating markets, et cetera, is we have more, as our ag community gets, the average age goes up and up and up, and it's a matter of who's working on the farms now, who's able to put the conservation practices on there. Are the conservation practices and activities that we're doing, or the, are we going to use this tilling method or that, this cover crop variety or that? What's going to be the economic pieces and parts to make a living for that family? And that's the, isn't that the key? I mean, how are we going to keep something that was talked with one of our corporate partners this past week was rural vitality. Every year I go pheasant hunting in South Dakota, the same place. We have gone to the same restaurant in Miller, South Dakota. Shout out to Bruce Knight, keep inviting me, please. We go to the same restaurant every single year, and every year we see fewer and fewer storefronts open, fewer restaurants open, and in fact that restaurant closed this year. And we were kind of bummed out. Wasn't that our steaks 2 years ago were that good, but gosh, we love going into town, but the town's dying. And so we see fewer and fewer homesteads that have lights on at night. Just not a lot going on because of that rural vitality. So how do we keep farmers farming, ranchers ranching? How do we keep those rural communities active? And that is a big economics piece, and we understand the importance on that. So one of the big things that we are taking a very large look at are the economics and rural vitality. How do we keep those rural communities alive and keep that going?
Great. So one of the things we are focused on in ESMC is the need for really context-specific technical assistance, right? In any given region or production system, what will move the needle on those issues we are interested in and move the needle on the metrics we're interested in will vary. And there are 2 million operators across our landscape, right? We can't be asking them all to do the same thing at the same time in the same ways. So technical assistance is important. Beyond that, or even including that, what are some of the ways that conservation districts could get engaged not only with ESMC, and they are now, but from your perspectives, how do we better tap, for instance, conservation districts and bring them more into the movement? I think there is some untapped potential there. Maybe, what is it?
Okay.
Yeah, why don't we start with Dave this time?
I don't want to pick on you. Is there anybody here from Stearns County, Minnesota?
All right.
They apply every single year for a grant. They don't always get them. But one of my points is they apply for them. They know that in that region of their state, we have funds. We're not the only ones. There's state programs. In Colorado, we're about to start a great new partnership with the state, and that's going to have a lot of ranching practices going on with that. NRCS will be a partner in that, and it's in some fashion. And it's finding out where those funding sources are. The great thing about the NRCS NACD partnership, it has always been looking at where those resources are. And I appreciate NRCS has a great, the CTA account, and they've got the programs, but it's also looking for where that interaction is with state programs. If I go to Wisconsin, it's working with the Milwaukee Municipal Solid Waste District. And the gentleman that runs that organization knows that he can put $100 million into cement and steel facilities to take care of all that stormwater, or he could just put practices in with all those farmers and pretty much farmers in that area, but filter that water that way. I mean, let's look at the New York City watershed. There are ways to do these things. Now, I also want to point out, though, failure happens. How many of you have tried a practice on your farm or your ranch and it hasn't worked? That's going to happen. But we shouldn't be punished for that. We should be looking at that and going, okay, let's look at the economics. Now, what did I do right? What did I do wrong? Let's try something else. Let's get into, maybe I need an agronomist to come in. Do we have those resources? Where I'm going with this is this. There are a lot of different resources out there right now. There are a lot of different funding sources. I know it's not simple. I know there's a lot of conservation districts out there with very small staffs, some with no staff. But do that reach out. Look at what's available. And there's even organizations like ours, we'll have staff get on the phone with you and help you figure out, well, that program's not going to work out for you, but you know what you should be looking at is maybe this one. Or partner up. Maybe you don't make an application, but maybe another organization does, and you're a part of it. There's all kinds of different ways to skin that cat, as they say.
Thank you. Amy, you've discussed some of the partnerships and how you're working on the ground. What are some untapped needs or opportunities do you see for conservation districts in these areas?
Yeah, well, I think we've seen some pretty exciting work happening in Illinois with the STAR program. And we are excited to see conservation districts innovate and develop programs that they think will lead to increased conservation practices in their area. So I know that there's a session today, I think, later about STAR, so I'm advertising it for you right now. But it's a sort of voluntary certification program. I'm not going to say anything more about that because I don't want to steal anyone's thunder or mess up exactly the details of it. But we've seen it spread really quickly across Illinois. It was developed in Champaign County. We're seeing lots of other counties interested in implementing it in their area. And I think we are always excited to support work that is sort of demonstrated to be a success in one place and is scaling up and specific to the context. Right now, I believe it's all still in Illinois, although someone may correct me later. But I think we see that sort of innovation that's happening on the ground, and we are excited to support that kind of work as it scales up and reaches more people in more places in Illinois and beyond.
Thank you. And how about you, Lakeisha? Opportunities?
Yep, I think to echo what I've heard on the panel so far, it's reaching out to our program directors, trying to find those opportunities for existing funding, and also thinking about ways to partner. But I would add a third in that our foundation, one of the things that we pride ourselves on is convening folks in spaces to identify research gaps and needs. And so I think the other piece is not a charge for you, but a charge for me to recognize the wealth of knowledge available here from you all, and us reaching out to you guys more to say, would you all like to be a part of convenings that we have, or panels, or any other opportunity to engage with you to hear what those research needs are. A huge amount of what we're interested in is how do we affect change? How do we encourage adoption? How do we take these innovations and then ensure that they actually are useful? And I feel as though the sea of people that I see here would be great resources for a lot of those types of questions. So I guess two charges. One, you guys reach out to me, and the other is I need to reach out to you.
Oh, thank you. All right, so this time I'll start with Amy. So you've all said repeatedly in the past couple of minutes, innovations. You're interested in innovations. What kind of innovations are you looking for, and or your organization? I'm sure there's something out there that really excites you, or that you've thought, oh, if only we could have something that did this. What are the sort of innovations you're looking for?
So I think some of the innovations we're looking for are like deeply nerdy. One of the things that we are really excited about is the crop insurance discount for cover crops that has been in Iowa for the last few years and was expanded to Illinois this year. Basically, I think we see there are lots of ways to innovate, and we are excited about many different things, but one of the things that we think about is like what programs reach the most farmers and how can we use those programs to incentivize conservation. So, these cover crop pilots, the cover crop discount are still in sort of pilot phase, and we don't know yet what will happen with them beyond the pilot phase, but that's one of the innovations that we are really excited to see.
Great. How about you, Dave?
I'd like to see just a continuation of innovation. A great example, a couple years back, we have a partnership with Altria, the tobacco company. They also make Chateau Ste. Michelle wine, which I enjoy a little bit more than the tobacco personally. But thank you. What's interesting there is that partnership was focused on soil health and conservation practices for tobacco growers in Kentucky. It's now expanded into North Carolina, Pennsylvania, and Virginia. But what was happening in Kentucky is they were trying some practices and they needed a special crimper. First they needed a special crimper, and then they needed a special type of drill to plant on a cover crop field for tobacco. And I'm not a tobacco grower, I do not know all the details, but I know this. The conservation district, which then ended up making a partnership with all the surrounding conservation districts, asked for us to pay for a crimper, a trailer, and a new implement that they developed. Now the reason I say that is, I'm not the person that's developing that innovation, but a lot of folks in this room on a lot of, your farms and ranches have figured out how to make things work. That type of innovation, if that's going to help other growers, we're looking for more people to bring those ideas to the table so that if we can figure out if they work, great. And then let's spread that out so that that practice may grow in that area. The economics for somebody like our foundation or one of the others to help fund that, I'm looking for that type of innovation.
Excellent. I really like that example. I think you're right. Conservation districts on the ground see needs and can bring the opportunities. Lakeisha, if someone comes with a new innovation too far, is that the sort of thing you can fund? And if so, how? How would you recommend they go about approaching you?
So there are a couple of ways. So we have open calls very often. In fact, we have a pre-proposal stage that's open right now. And so the first stop will be give me a call, right? I have that. I don't know if I'm going to regret that. There's a lot of you in this room, and there's only one of me. But I would say that that's generally the first place to start is the conversation space, right? To figure out if what you're looking for is something that we can fund. And typically, if it's not for me, I will happily direct you towards someone else if I know who that person is. For us, we tend to fund projects that are of larger size, so it may not be necessarily a smaller project to fund one particular innovation, but if there's a larger concept that you'd like to talk to me about, that we can work through, and then RFAs are often put out. So I would say check our website, check with me to see those particular spaces, and if they can come to me with that innovation, yeah.
And put together a partnership.
Absolutely.
All right. Thank you. So we have a little less than 5 minutes. We have 4 minutes left. Why don't we open it up to the room to see if there are any questions for our panelists?
I see somebody in the back, I think. Right?
Yes. I don't know if there
Hello?
must be microphone.
Oh, hello.
Hello, my
Yes.
name is Leanne Buck. I'm from the Minnesota Association of Districts. Hi, guys. Thank you. I think this is a very timely topic, and I guess I have two questions. One would be, we've looked at different carbon trading programs and outcomes and things like that. What's different now? Why now? Because this has been talked about for 20 years. There's going to be carbon credits traded on the Chicago board and all of that kind of stuff. So we've seen it come and go, and we're wondering why now. And then the second question would be, you can tell a lot about an organization by their budgets, and Soil and Water Conservation District technology budgets are very weak. And so as we look at these metrics, I guess in Minnesota, we're required to show outcomes for nitrogen, phosphorus, sediment every time we do a BMP. And so you guys were hitting on that, but I haven't seen it yet from USDA. So is that future infrastructure on technology? Are we a couple farm bills away from policy on when every time a landowner does a BMP, we're gonna have to show those outcomes? And so I'm just, because I don't wanna do infrastructure and technology by grants. I want it to be infused in the system.
I'll briefly start with the first one, and then maybe someone can take the second one. So the whole issue of carbon markets is, I think one of the things is that scientists have recently recognized that not only do we have to reduce greenhouse gas emissions to combat climate change and the climatic impacts that we're seeing, but we really have to increase soil carbon storage, right? It's one of the lowest cost and yet highest impact opportunities to really draw down carbon from the atmosphere. And there's a lot of focus. And I have to say, a lot of the activities that do in fact increase soil carbon have multiple beneficial impacts, right? So improved soil tilth and fertility and productivity, biodiversity. So there's a lot of opportunities that come with it. So there's a huge demand, there's a huge need. We need the markets to really stimulate it and pay for it and provide the technical assistance and the verification, if you will, that we are in fact seeing what we want to see happen across the horizon. So that's the nutshell version, if you will. And I think there's a lot of opportunities because we're now looking at these markets differently as an opportunity and a way to incentivize and pay farmers and ranchers for what they do. How about others on the second part?
I'd like to jump on something that Amy said earlier. Is a few of us are also involved with a group on crop insurance, trying to make sure that basically those good practices that you're doing are rewarded within your crop insurance payments. And therefore, that system will set up in a financial business sense the ability to create a, let's call it a market, but, and I will point out NACD is at that table, but by having a crop insurance benefit, we therefore are moving into a market-based system that will then allow us to help with the measurements.
All right, we are out of time. I'm going to have to say thank you to the panelists and to everyone for participating.
Thank you.